High Court in Gauteng has dismissed Dr. Bandile Masuku's bid to nullify the Special Investigating Unit's report into alleged irregularities and corruption with costs. For more on this, we're joined by our colleague Samkele Maseko. Samkele, what happened at the court today?
Desiree, essentially what happened is that the former MEC of Health in Gauteng, Dr. Bandile Masuku, did apply to the North Gauteng High Court to nullify the SIU report, which was ultimately used by the Premier of Gauteng, David Makhura, to fire him as the MEC of Health in the province, particularly after that PPE tender scandal in Gauteng, which involved the Royal Baka projects of the late Tandisiwe the king of the Baka Nation in the Eastern Cape, who was embroiled in this tender fraud of over 100 and something million rands in Gauteng. The MEC of Health was found by the SIU to have derelict from his duties as the oversight head of the Department of Health in the province, and he had said and put across points that he did not have jurisdiction to oversee the tender procurement system in the province, and that was not amongst his functions, and that would tantamount to interference of the political arm against the administrative arm of the state, and he had argued that that is against what he was employed to do as the political head in the department. But just to read one of the points over the functions of the MEC, and in point 67 of the judgment handed down by the North Gauteng High Court, it reads, quote, "In my view, the SIU was not at all irrational in forming its opinion. The SIU saw no crime having been committed by Dr. Masuku. The SIU saw no basis of the civil action against Dr. Masuku. Indeed, it is decided that there was no action it could do or should take. The SIU faithfully reported that it had learned to the Premier and to the President. It deemed that Dr. Masuku's conduct to be wanting. To form such an opinion is plainly within the scope of functions. No irrationality can exist in the SIU being disappointed by Dr. Masuku's discharge of his role. The fact that Dr. Masuku held a different view about his accountability is unimportant. The SIU has no obligation to defer Dr. Masuku's perspective, which he voiced fully and was part of the matrix of the facts investigated." End of quote. And then the order that was granted by the North Gauteng High Court full bench was that the application is dismissed with cost, including the cost of 2 legal counsels. So essentially, Dr. Bandile Masuku has been dealt a huge blow by the North Gauteng High Court, dismissing his application to set aside that SIU report, which was compiled by the SIU and handed over to President Cyril Ramaphosa and to the Premier of Gauteng. You remember that Premier David Makhura had called Dr. Bandile Masuku to resign as the MEC, and Dr. Bandile Masuku refused, which prompted the Premier of Gauteng to fire the former MEC of Health and redeploy him to the provincial legislature, as he is also suspended in his former function as a member of the Provincial Executive Committee of the African National Congress in the province. But essentially, as it stands, the SIU report, which was damning against the oversight role of the MEC when it comes to the tender procurement system and fraud that happened during the tender processes of the PPEs in Gauteng during the first wave of COVID-19. That report stands, and it's up to the former MEC, Dr. Bandile Masuku, now, where he's not yet clearly indicated whether he will be taking this particular judgment by the North Gauteng High Court on review or not.
Samkele, thank you so much for bringing us up to speed in terms of this development. We're now joined on the line by SIU Spokesperson Kaizer Kganyago. A very good day to you, Mr. Kganyago. What's the SIU's reaction to this outcome?
No, the outcome is really something that we are pleased about. We are really pleased by the fact to whatever we've been saying to the people, that all our investigations are allegation-based and our outcomes are evidence-based. Therefore, we have proven to the court that what we are doing in the right way. It is not personal at all, as it was purported to have been, and it also affirms us to say that we should continue to do what we are doing and make sure that we do it according to what the law says, and for us, we are very excited.
What's the next step now in terms of the law taking its course, and also what recourse does Mr. Masuku have going on from here?
because he's the one who took us to court, because he was of the opinion that what we did was personal and it was all about him. And if I remember at the time, he was very clear that we don't know what we are doing or something to that effect. But for us, we have done what we have to do, and we have given the report to the Premier, and the Premier has acted on the basis of that report. And we are fine with it, and we are moving on with all the other investigations that we are doing. I don't know whether he would want to take the matter forward. It will be up to him if he wants to, but I don't know what recourse he would have. But we are satisfied that, because the other thing that makes us satisfied is that it was done by a full bench of the High Court, where it was 3 judges, and they all agreed that our report stands and it is based on evidence, on facts. And that for us, we are really given a new lease of life to basically continue doing the investigation, other investigations that we're doing in Gauteng and all the other provinces.
Of course, Dr. Masuku was not the only person implicated. Just in case, in terms of all the other cases, are you able to give us feedback at this moment in terms of where you are?
Obviously, some of the cases are going to be appearing before the tribunal sometime in April, where some of the merits of the cases that were before the tribunal are going to be dealt with. And as you might know, the outcomes that we've already achieved is freezing people's the head of the Gauteng and the CFO's pensions. We have recovered almost about 240 million rand from that contract alone. The one of Royal Baka, that money was recovered and forfeited back to the state. That is including the one that we have not paid as yet, was not paid as yet. All of those monies were saved. And for us, we are progressing very well, and the other matters will be appearing before court, and we hope that we will achieve the outcomes that we have achieved, because we base everything that we do on integrity, and we base everything that we do on the evidence before us, because we don't want to personalize anything. We've always said that our investigations are not against individuals, but we work on the basis of the evidence, and if the evidence leads us to you, we will follow you and get whatever the state has suffered.
And finally, just before we let you go, with all the work that the SIU has been doing and the report that Advocate Mutibi put out recently, are you getting a sense, are you getting more cases, or are you getting a sense that there's some sort of recognition that there is a fight, a pushback against corruption in the country?
No, definitely. From where we are seated, we are being given the mandate after proclamations are signed by the president, and we do what we're supposed to do. And that has brought a lot of attention to us. And because it has brought that kind of attention to us, you would see that almost every week we get new proclamations being signed. And then that is a sign of confidence in us. And we are clear that we will do what we're supposed to do with the resources that we have, and make sure that we fight against corruption in this country.
Kaizer Kganyago is the spokesperson for the SIU, and that new development there, that former Gauteng Health MEC, Dr. Bandile Masuku, unsuccessful in his bid to overturn the contents of a report from the SIU finding him guilty in PPE corruption.